um, when I was at the University of Pittsburgh, there was a opportunity to study abroad in Cuba. You guys still have that program, I assume. I don't know if it's been put on pause because of COVID, but I studied abroad with Pitt in Cuba, and I fell in love with Cuba. And I didn't know still what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to do something that involved Cuba after I did my semester there. And I can pause and we can come back to each person if you want, or how would you like?
Go ahead. Tell us your whole story.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was in Cuba as a student, and I ended up making my way back there, just really fascinated by the culture. I kind of delved headfirst into everything. I spoke Spanish before going to Cuba, but Cuban Spanish is its own world. And after being there for about 8 months, I was thinking to myself, well, what am I, what can I do career-wise? How can I make this into a career? Just a place. Well, you can report on a place, you can document a place. Obviously, it's a fascinating place for Americans to go, so maybe something with tourism. And I kind of just wrote down all of these different industries that I could use in Cuba. I started writing to all different foreign desk editors and the big, like the dream team foreign desk, not just local papers, but I basically, I sent a lot of emails to the New York Times, Washington Post, and said, I was very blunt after about a year in Cuba. And I said, I know Cuba better than any of the people on the Times payroll. I remember writing to the National Foreign Desk and saying, I know Cuba better than anyone you've ever sent to Cuba. And that's how I got my first gig. I worked in journalism in Cuba, reporting on US-Cuba relations for about 6 or 7 years. I also delved into high-end, or high culture tourism for Americans who are interested in learning about Cuba. And again, my fascination with Cuba led me to all of these different industries that aren't necessarily related, but they all had to do with the place that I was most interested in and the place that I was very interested in teaching other people about. So then of course, COVID hit. I'm sure everybody has a then COVID hit story. And tourism got shut down. Mainstream US media outlets were not so interested in the Cuba story anymore. They were more interested in Trump story and COVID story. So I didn't really have a lot of, I didn't have a lot of pitches. I came back to Ohio, where I was born and raised. I grew up here, and I started all over again, thinking, well, if my life isn't based around Cuba, if my brand isn't Cuba, how can I rebrand myself? I've always been interested in construction and design, and I figured I can start renovating houses. I took what I learned in Cuba, which was all about, resolving with things that you don't have, and with the supply chain issues here and around the world. That was a great skill to have on hand. It was also great that I spoke Spanish, so I could speak directly with all of the contractors I was working with. And again, just kind of dive headfirst into something that you learn along the way. So I think it's all about making mistakes and figuring out what you're most interested in, more than anything, more than a dream job, for instance. So. Whoop, I can't hear you.
Oh, I was sorry. That's so interesting, very interesting. So Youssef, go ahead.
It's been a while since I've done virtual stuff. Forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, I definitely agree a lot with Hannah. And just like learning along the way is a big part of the process. also coming from like a Spanish speaking background, which explains why you see lockers behind me. I've just finished teaching today. There's a student club meeting right now. That's why I'm letting them. I didn't want to cancel, letting them do their thing, even though they tried to cancel this meeting because it's about book ban, controversial issue in the district. So we're trying to fight that, but keep down the hush hush right now. Anyways, so I did a study abroad just like Hannah did, but in Mexico, and that led me to become a Spanish teacher. And my first gig as a teacher was in Prince George County, Maryland, PG County, very close outside DC. And while I was teaching there, I guess like 4 years into teaching there, that's when it kind of the seed of my entrepreneurship was being planted, because I got a haircut one day. They actually have a barber school. It's a Votech school at Crossland. So they teach like barbering, heating and cooling, bricklaying, all types of trades like that, which is pretty useful for kids, especially, gives them job security, especially at that school. Is very low income school. One of the lowest income schools in Prince George County, which is already has its kind of challenges to begin with. But anyways, I got my haircut like really short for the first time in a long time. And a popular hairstyle at that school is sporting waves, so a lot of my students, so basically students played a major role in me forming my business. And, this was never planned or anything. I was just a Spanish teacher, but, they call me Mr. A, because as you can see, my name is like the alphabet. So they, Mr. A, you should get waves. And the more I looked into it, I got kind of more interested in it. And I was like, oh, wow, this is a whole world. It's there's some pages on Instagram that have like hundreds of thousands of followers, all revolving around this wave culture. So as I got more into it, as you can see, I'm sporting the waves spinning. So you need to have a do-rag for this. So I created my own do-rag. And this is where I studied. I got my major in anthropology, cultural anthropology. So with my cultural background, I kind of tied the connection I had with my students with my own background in Egyptian culture and just African culture, African diasporic culture, and Arabian culture to create. This is just like one of my products. It's called the A-rag. It's like an Arabian do-rag. It has a tassel like a keffiyeh. If you're familiar with the Arabian scarf called a keffiyeh, basically has a tassel and it has this type of particular pattern on it. So what I did, I made a do-rag version of it, which for me, it was funny because I thought it seemed weird that these didn't exist already. But basically, it was just blending my own culture with the culture that my students got me familiar with to create this product. So currently, this is my side business, apart from teaching, is creating a whole bunch of different A-rags, and they all have their own unique style and culture. There's an Egyptian A-rag. Obviously, it's a play off a word. It sounds like Arabs, but it's an A-rag. You have the Ghanaian Year of the Return A-rag that represents West Africa. And also the A in A-rag stands for Africa. It stands for African diasporic and Arab culture. So it's like a fusion of all of those. So, each A-rag represents a different culture or a different theme. This is actually the Steel City one. So, I had to rep my home city, Pittsburgh, for that one. One day maybe we'll get the Steelers players to wear these when they run out to play games. So that's kind of how my business started. And right now, similar to Hannah, last year I bought some property that has a commercial storefront and has some residential units. So that's how I got into being like a landlord. Teachers don't get paid that much, so we got to be creative. Especially in the summers, we get the time, we have time off there, so you can really dive into your different projects. So I wasn't the best handyman, but I'm getting I'm getting better at that. And also just, it's kind of hard to establish a network of handymen, plumbers, and electricians and stuff. And especially when you're new to the city, I'm still fairly new to Philadelphia. That's where I'm teaching now. So just kind of building that team of trustworthy and dependable plumbers and electricians and contractors and stuff. It takes some time. So that's kind of like my second gig. And I guess my third gig, which is a work in progress, is opening a cafe in that commercial front. And in that cafe, I plan on a lot of the cafes that I went to in DC, I got inspired from. There's like a lot. New York City as well has a huge cafe scene. It's always been kind of like my dream to open up a cafe as well. I love coffee, and I love like cafes that have a really cool ambiance and you just want to sit there forever. And it's just something I've always loved. So there's there's a couple cafes in DC that they sell merchandise, and it's kind of like a versatile cafe where they do more than just serve coffee and drinks, but they also have merch, and sometimes they have events. So I kind of want to have a cafe like that where I sell my merchandise there as well. So that's kind of like the different projects that I'm working on right now, along with being a Spanish teacher. So if that was long-winded.
Very cool. Very cool.
Thanks.
Okay, Gandhi, you're up.
All right, guys. You can hear me, right? Okay. So my story is a little bit funny because everything I have done is essentially an act of survival, if you will. Now, I was originally trained as a lawyer in Nigeria, where I practiced environmental and human rights advocacy. And if you know anything about Nigeria, it's a very dangerous environment, especially if you're someone who asks a lot of questions. I happen to ask a lot of questions, even before I became a lawyer. And I also hailed from the oil-producing communities. So that's where you have the multinationals polluting the environment, destroying nature and impoverishing the communities. So I had an option, really. Just make money like a lot of Nigerian lawyers and just, focus on your own life, or pay a little bit of attention to what is happening in the environment and, to my people, essentially. I mean, I could do well by myself, really, but the culture that nurtured me also taught me that success is not really an individual thing. Success is a community thing. I mean, here in the United States, it tends to be a little bit different. But in my culture, as a person, you haven't succeeded if you couldn't carry some of the members of your community with you. So I had to pay so much attention to trying to fix that problem with the environment, and it got me into trouble with the Nigerian authorities. So there were attempts to hurt me, so I had to leave Nigeria. But before I left, I wanted to move from law into politics, but I wanted to do that without the patronage of existing political establishments. I didn't want to take anybody's money. All right. So I wanted to see if I could set up a business that I could leverage to sponsor a political career, so I could be as independent as I could possibly be in that circumstance. So I drew up a project to essentially computerize primary and secondary learning in Nigerian schools. Nigeria has 36 states. So I drew this program to cover 6 of the states in the Niger Delta area. It was a very ambitious program. We're going to, train the teachers on how to use computers. We're going to, seek funding to purchase these computers, distribute them, and then we're going to build maintenance labs to, maintain the computers and, continue the training. It was going to be like a self-reinforcing program. So we did that. But because of what I told you earlier, the Nigerian banks denied us the last leg of funding that was going to go into bringing that program to life. Now, I had spent almost everything that I'd saved individually. So when that happened and the political attacks started to come because of my vocal activism back there, I had to leave. Now, when I got here in the United States, it was a bit different. The opportunities were there. Great people. Hard work is $22 trillion in the economy. So if Nigerian banks couldn't give me money, I could certainly find a way to get some of that $22 trillion from the US economy, right? So I did a master's program, not in law, and that was deliberate. I did the master's program in international political economy. I wanted to understand, how the international system functioned, both politically and economically, because it turns out that's how the destinies of nations are, decided. So I studied that at Pitt. And in the course of that, of course, I encountered the African Studies program where I became a fellow and where I picked a lot of skills, made a lot of connections and friendships and, developed so much of what I know and do today. So when I graduated in 2016, I got a job with PNC Bank. I was analyzing geopolitics for their investment division. And it was an interesting job, something simply I would ordinarily love to do. But I happen to be very opinionated. So the structure of a corporate environment, just like the structure of the Nigerian society, proved a little bit difficult for me. There were promises of, promotion and all of that. I just had to, be a good boy. If I saw something bad, I wasn't supposed to say anything, I was supposed to couch it in some nice languaging. Now, all of these felt a little bit off with my person, so I had to leave. I set up my own company, Blu-Pearl International, in 2017. I worked with the bank for a little over a year. But in early 2017, as I was preparing to leave the bank, I set up Blu-Pearl. And while working at the bank, we had data that showed, the migration flow into the West, especially the United States. Now, I ran some numbers, and it turned out that the migration from Africa into the US was picking up due to a number of factors. But more interestingly, these immigrants, they came to the new environment, they picked the culture they learned, but they never left their food. They always ate, African diets. All right. So that was a revelation. So it turned out that was a market that was forming. Also, that market needed to be, fed. So as Blu-Pearl was being set up, we had to decide what exactly we're going to do. Of course, naturally, we're going to do law because that's my primary training. But we also set up a portfolio for import of agricultural products, essentially African food items, targeting the African immigrant population. We have expanded that now to include Mexicans and Asians. Then my company moved further than that. I noticed that in the course of our, movement of goods and services, most of the problems that business people like myself, had was the question of movement. All right, you needed if you had to set up business in a new environment, you needed a visa, you needed connections in that country, a whole lot of things you needed to do, a lot of ends you needed to tie to be able to move forward. So I sensed that there could be an opportunity there. So we started to do some digging, and we found that a lot of the island territories actually relied on what they called citizenship by investment for survival. That's how they made money. It was like a product you could sell. So my company reached out, and we got licensed by about 5 of these territories, the most notable one being Antigua and Barbuda, to promote their citizenship by investment program. It's a high ticket service for high net worth individuals. So we did that. Now, combining these two services, as of 2017, when we started, it was just me. But as of today, We've expanded significantly. We're doing a lot of things. We have an operational facility in two West African countries, one in Nigeria, one in the Republic of Benin, where we process some of the products that we'll bring into the United States. We have distributors across the Northeast here in the US. We're trying to branch out into California and Texas. For the international immigration, as opposed to litigation, what high ticket consulting does for you in law is that you put in much less time and you make a lot more money. Now, for me, as I told you, money isn't really the push. I'm trying to put resources together so I could do politics. That's my calling. That's what I want to do. I want to go back to Nigeria to vie for power. All right. But I'm trying as much as possible to put resources together so I don't have to rely on people who will have to call the shots. So that's, in a summary, is how I got here. And that's what I'm doing right now.
Very cool. Very cool. So interesting. So all of you guys have such different stories, you know, and different career paths. So it's very interesting. So now looking back at your education and how, like, what you're doing, and some of you quite early, you know, really in your careers, even 2017. So just a few years ago, what do you guys think would have helped you when you were in school? What do you wish? Do you wish you would have studied business? Like, I mean, did you guys pick the right major, or what experiences do you wish you kind of would have grabbed hold of while you were still in college? And we can just go back through, Hannah, if you want to.
Sure. Well, I will say I was actually giggling when Youssef mentioned, you know, he has to invest the time and energy to, you know, find all the good electricians and masons and framers, et cetera, all of these different tradesmen. I think the one thing that I, looking back, would have done differently is I would have learned, you know, useful trades. I would have taken classes at a community college or at Pitt about, you know, like framing. I would love to learn how to make a wall, or, you know, frame in doors or windows. And I mean, as far as, I think, you know, I think a college degree can offer you so much more than just a college degree. First of all, networking in college is so important. I think that's one of, like, the benefits to going to a fancy school versus a community college is you get to meet all of the other people who've already done the networking. And Pitt is this, like, beautiful kind of, Pitt offered me so many different opportunities to network, but also just to test out different things. I had no idea back then that studying abroad in Cuba would lead me down a career path. I studied abroad in Cuba because I spoke Spanish and I wanted to get out of cold Pittsburgh. So I would say during college, during your undergrad, if something seems interesting to you, figure out a way to learn about it. You know, I went, I did a semester in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, but, you know, the University of Pittsburgh didn't offer a program in Dhaka. So I took a semester off school and I went to Bangladesh and made my own semester abroad there. I mean, there are so many unconventional things that you can do. I think it's all about first getting to know yourself, you know, like read books about learning more about yourself. And once you figure out things that bring joy to your life, I know that sounds kind of hokey, but if you figure out something that you like to do, learn more about it, and you'll be, I think it's much easier to go from being interested in something and making a career out of it than, oh, well, you know, I think I'm going to study this because I'm going to do this thing. This will be my career path, because more often than not, you know, it won't be your career path, or you won't be able to find a job, or you'll find that job and you'll get it and you won't like it. And I think the thing that the three of us, the panelists, have in common is we went after what brought us joy and what we were interested in doing. So, oh, and I will just say one more thing. and I'll probably reiterate this later, but I think finding mentors is the best thing that you can do for yourself. It's the best investment you can make in yourself. Finding people who do maybe not what your career path is, but finding people who are already well established in something you might be interested in doing, and picking their brains, inviting them out to coffee, and you paying. As a 19-year-old, you invite a 50-year-old out to coffee and say, hey, I want an hour of your time. I would love to pick your brain. And I think that's a great way to learn, is by learning from people who've already done it before you.
Yeah, definitely. And I would just like to add on that, like some things I definitely wish I would have received education on is like just the process of like buying property. I mean, it's just when you're doing it, you realize like how much like you don't know, and then you start to question like, why don't I know this information? Just like basic stuff, because I mean, everybody, no matter what career you're in, you eventually, I think, want to buy a home. So it's just like, this is just like general conventional information that like we should know. And it was just shocking to me how much of a learning experience, just like learning the in and outs of a FHA loan, and just like all the different aspects of it, like how you don't have to necessarily get a typical standard house for FHA loan, but you can max out on like a mixed use property that has 5 units and like get the most out of that loan without having to do a conventional loan, which, is very hard to do because that requires like 50% down payment as opposed to something much less than that. So just, getting a better grasp of the process involved in buying a home or whatever property that you're interested in. Also, yeah, just like the knowing the leases, like how to understand all the language in a lease, and then the loans, and just like the mortgage process and how it, because it gets pretty complicated. It almost seems like never ending to a certain extent. Then also just like how to set up your own LLC as well. Just like that information would have been very useful to know. So
LLC, what's an LLC?
Limited liability, what's the C?
Company.
Yeah. Limited liability company, which you have to do. It's a requirement to start any business. You have to have an LLC, and they'll give you like an EIN number, which is required. Basically, for whatever funds, if you're going to be collecting money for that business, then you have to have an LLC. And that's they ask these things in the bank when you're opening up a bank account for that company. You have to have an LLC, and they have to have the EIN number before you open that bank account. So just knowing all those different steps would have been extremely useful. Those two things, and then just like to piggyback on what Hannah was saying, just like I think you have to find like a nice balance between. I mean, I did teaching Spanish, and being a teacher is something that I wanted to do, but it's not necessarily entrepreneurship. But at the same time, stuff happened along the way kind of organically that led me into different directions. So you kind of have to find a balance between taking like actual action, because like right now when you're in college, it's hard you can't see the future. So you do kind of want to make decisions and like, okay, I have some interest in this field or that field. So, I'm going to try my best to do what it takes to become, a doctor or engineer or a teacher or whatever it is. But I'm still going to allow myself to be open to other things that happen along the way, organically. And, and I feel like having that balance between those two things will really open up a lot of opportunities for you. And just to be open, have an open mind for those things, because you might not even, when they're happening, you may not even think in the moment that it's like relevant at all. But then you start to realize, wait a minute, this might actually be kind of interesting or cool if I do this or that. So yeah, just being open to those different opportunities that pop up along the way of your journey of discovering what you want to do in your career?
All right. For me, I think it was essentially networking. I just wish I had made, and I have a lot of friends, but I just wish I had made more. You just can't have too many friends in this world. Um, Now, I'll tell you a little story. You see, I came into Pitt. I came on a scholarship, but it wasn't like 100%. So I was supposed to make up for some parts of that. And when I started my studies, my finances took a dip. I was essentially self-funded for the other part. So I started knocking on doors. It was just instinctual. I didn't really know too many people, so I would just go around offices and I would knock on these doors and try to start a conversation with professors, with teaching assistants, and that's how I found the African Studies program. Dr. Macrina Lele, Anna Maria, and the rest is history, because they stepped in and I was able to, get through my program funding wise. But also through them, I made a lot of very important connections. Now today, we do business in China and the Ukraine. Ukraine is at war now, but we do business there. And if only I had more Chinese friends, I think probably I probably would have developed the ability to speak Mandarin, which I think would have helped our business a lot. For Ukraine, we've done pretty well with building connections there. I don't speak Ukrainian, but some of the Ukrainian people we do business with, they speak English. So the thing I wish I had done more was, build more networks. Like just keep making friends until you can't have any more. And if I could pick up some international language, along the way, that would also be very, very helpful. One more thing, I've always had an international focus. I do think that limiting yourself to your domestic environment is sort of disservice. You're probably cheating yourself. You could be shocked by the sort of low barriers to entry for business opportunities, say outside the United States, but that involves, the United States and some other country, right? So if you partnered with me now, say capital wise, all right, we could set up some new market. I'm looking right now for buyers of, processed palm oil, because I have a huge reserve of that. I could literally get tons of, palm oil, but I'm looking for US industries to take that. And sometimes when I go to, challenged neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, I call young people and I speak to them and I make them promises. Look, if you can get me a company that will do this, you guys are going to make a lot of money. So that's what I think people should try and do. Look outside the US for businesses that can leverage the American market. Americans have huge purchasing power, but they don't have everything they want to buy. American industries have a lot of capacity. If you find a way into their good graces, you're going to make money. And if you're like me, that sees money as a tool for a higher end. That's how I see money, and that's why I'm chasing it. Then you want to be able to access as many of these opportunities as you can find.
Very good. Very good. Well, I want to pause here and open it up. If you guys have any questions, I know if you don't, I'll keep going with questions because I've got lots. But does anyone in our audience have any follow-up questions or any new questions?
I do have a quick question. So I am very interested in real estate. I have family that does real estate and whatnot, and so it is something that I'd like to potentially do as a side business in the future. So you were talking about things, you wish you had done earlier, but what would you say are things that I could be doing now to kind of set me up for the future?
Hannah, do you want to?
I was gonna say, why don't you go ahead and then I'll follow up.
So you could some things you could do is like just look into the different or try to figure out for example, like I always thought that I was just gonna whenever I was gonna buy property, that was just gonna be like a house, just like they call it like your forever home. You know what I mean? Just the house that you're gonna have. But then as I thought about it more and more, what a lot of people do is they'll buy, mixed use, or they'll buy a duplex, and they'll or maybe like a triplex, and they'll live there, and basically live rent free, by collecting the rent of your tenants to help pay the mortgage, and then and that helps you pay off the mortgage quicker, and then even after that, maybe by at that point, if you pay your mortgage on time, you'll be able to get a better loan for another future property, and then you can maybe buy even like another duplex, do the same thing with that one, like live rent free, but this time you're collecting the rent from all the units from your previous property, and basically eventually this is kind of the plan that I have. Eventually the third property could be like your forever home, but then now you set up a situation where you're collecting rent from all the different units and all the different tenants, and it makes paying off the mortgage of your forever home a lot easier and quicker. Plus, if you have like family or like kids and stuff, you're setting them up for like a really good situation where they're going to inherit that from you. So maybe I'll start thinking about like what kinds of properties would you be interested in, and then after you figure out what kinds of properties would you be interested in, figure out what kind of loans do you need to get that property. I would suggest an FHA, just because it's the most affordable, because it requires the smallest amount of the upfront down payment, and you can get up to, with the FHA, you have a maximum of like five units. You can either have five residential units, or I'm sorry, it's four max. So you can have 4 residential units or 3 residential units and 1 commercial, so you can still get, you can buy a commercial unit, even with the FHA loan, because the FHA stands for first home owner. What's the A stand for? Not sure, but it's basically first homeowner loan. So typically it's not common, but people don't really know that. And I had to figure that out on my own. It's like, you don't need a conventional loan to get to buy like a commercial unit or to buy a non-house. You can still use the FHA, but there's just like limits and protocols. Like, for example, you have to live in at the property with the FHA loan. If you get like a commercial loan, that's like, so there's basically 2 kinds of loans. So if you get the commercial loan, you don't have to live at the property, but no one really does the commercial loans unless you're like a huge investor. That's why I was competing a lot with like these big investors. For them, it was like nothing, just to buy up like all cash, and it was really hard to find one. Like looking for good realtors actually would be a good thing to look into, because they'll help you kind of find the property that you want, and they'll kind of help advocate for you. So yeah, figuring out what kind of property you would be interested in, and then figuring out like all the different options that you have with the FHA loan. And now I think they even offer like some banks even offer like a cash upfront. They'll give you the cash upfront. I hear that it's like a new option now. I would look at interest rates, or like a big thing. I took advantage of like the COVID season, just because like at one point the interest rates were like at all-time low. So that's like when I wanted to get a property. So those are like all these different factors you have to consider: interest rates, the type of loan, the type of property, and of course there's like foreclosures as well too. Like, you have to ask yourself the question, Are you only interested in like turnkey is what they use for like a place that's completely ready? Or are you open to the idea of putting in a lot of work, but then again, like Hannah and I were discussing, you have to find like a good team of like builders and contractors for that. So yeah, just like considering all those factors and researching like the different options you have with like the different loans and with like the different properties. But yeah, you can definitely max out on your FHA loan and get, that would be my suggestion. You can get the most out of that without having to put a crazy amount of cash down with a commercial loan. Yeah, Hannah, you can go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Awesome. First of all, I guess my question to you, Haley, would be like, what year are you right now?
I'm a sophomore.
Okay, cool. So you have literally your entire life ahead of you. It's okay if you think you're interested in real estate, and it's okay if you learn about real estate and realize I actually don't like this. And now is the time to explore what you're interested in. If I had any advice for myself as a sophomore, I guess my advice to you would be, whatever, if you're in Pittsburgh, or I don't know if your family is outside of Pittsburgh, wherever you're going to be for a summer or 6 weeks, create kind of a, see if you could follow, first of all, do some research about different areas. If there's an area that's like really interesting to you, like right now I'm working in this historic neighborhood. I grew up in this city, but I didn't know about this specific historic neighborhood. And of course, now there's a lot of gentrification. It's kind of becoming a trendier neighborhood for people. People are moving back into the center of the city. And I didn't know any of this before coming back to Columbus. Like I really did start at zero. So my best advice to you would be find a realtor who's already doing something that you think you might be interested in doing. Take them out for coffee. Say, I'm Haley. This is what I'm studying. And I think I might be interested in this. Could you tell me what it is that you do? So then you can actually learn, well, what does a realtor do versus what does someone who flips houses do versus what someone who is a landlord, but then also flips. So there are all of these categories within real estate that, some of them might be boring and some of them might be really fascinating to you. And I think if you start asking people, again, who are already doing what you think you might be interested in doing, learn more about what their day-to-day looks like. I'm someone who I've never had a job where I sit in front of the computer all day. I was telling Anna Maria, this is like my third time using Zoom ever because that's not my lifestyle. I don't have bosses. I don't have so much computer work. What I have a lot of is, wearing a hard hat and Timberlands and being in a construction site. And I love it. I think it's super interesting, but I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have studied that because I didn't even know that I didn't know that that was an option. So if you think that maybe you want to dabble in real estate, learn more about what people do and what their lifestyle looks like, because it might be something you're really interested in, or you might not have to waste your time after you have a 2-hour-long meeting with someone, or you ask to shadow someone for a day. I know it might sound odd, but we have, take your child to work day. I don't know why we don't have that as teenagers or as young adults or as university students. And I think that's what you could do either in like an interval of whether it's just a coffee or a 6-week make your own internship with one of your family members who's a realtor, or reach out to someone in the community who's a kind of a big name realtor. Introduce yourself. And I guarantee you there aren't a lot of sophomores in college reaching out to the big wig realtor saying, let me learn from you. Everybody wants to hear, that someone idolizes them or someone wants to learn from them. No one will ever, reject a young person wanting to learn from them. So I have a note that I wanted to share, one thing that I think could be a valuable resource. One of my best friends growing up, she graduated college with a degree in photojournalism, and she didn't know what she wanted to do when she grew up. And she was kind of paralyzed by fear. And I think a lot of times that happens when you're, about to graduate, especially now with COVID. It's like everything it feels so scary and unknown. The one thing is, your career path, especially if you think you want to do something entrepreneurial, is not going to be a linear path. I think that's the other thing that the three of us have in common, the three of the panelists. It's like nothing was linear. It's all about, I'm going to go down this path. Oh, I'm going to pivot. Okay, I'm going to go down this tangent, take a step back, go down another path. So, I think the blessing of 2022, or like a post-COVID world, is that really the world is your oyster. So I just want to get back to, I have a best friend, her name is Megan Tan. She created a beautiful podcast that might be really helpful to someone in college or about to graduate college. And it's all about navigating, what am I going to do with my life career-wise? And it's called Millennial. I know you guys aren't millennials. That makes me feel really old. But I would definitely recommend the first season of this podcast called Millennial. And it's all about how to take your fear and channel it into putting yourself out into the world and learning about your interests. And also, just specifically as far as real estate is concerned, there's a great podcast. It's called Bigger Pockets. They have like a million different episodes, and you can pick and choose. I think it's a really good informational tool. So Bigger Pockets podcast, and then Millennial, the first season. That's my shout out.
Thank you so much.
I have a question I'd like to ask. So, what advice would you give for those that have multiple interests or multiple skills? Like I know some people are like, focus on one thing and like pursue that one thing. But, I personally, I have an interest in politics, and, I'm thinking about switching back to that major. And, I think going into journalism, maybe having like a media business would be cool. I also, sometimes sketch out dresses and fashion wear. So what advice would you have for those that are interested in a multitude of things?
Well, let me take that on. I think you should just go on. As the last panelist said, it's not a linear path, and you will find that being a jack of all trade, actually being good at many things instead of being super at one thing, is actually pretty good. That's I actually prefer to have some idea of a lot of things than to have this quantum idea of just one thing. Now, in my own case, as a trained lawyer, I make money from law. I do immigration consulting, both international and domestic. I write legal opinions. I write for other attorneys. I write for other individuals. I appear at legal programs and podcasts. I make presentations. I get paid for some of those. But I also sell. I think I'm a salesman, because I have products that my company produces, and I need markets, and I go poach these markets, and I try to create new markets. So I sell. I'm a salesman. Now, outside of that, when I'm trying to look for a problem, maybe create a new business, all right, I become a student. I could learn from anybody. I recently, actually, last 2 years, I bought a home somewhere around South Hills. I used to live on the north side of Pittsburgh, and then I moved out. And my neighbor happens to be a guy who builds bridges. That's how he described his job. So sometimes I'll sit with him, essentially to understand how people who build bridges make money. When you're not building a new bridge, what's happening? When the city or the state or the country is run out of bridge contracts or bridge construction jobs, what do you guys do? And you'll be surprised what insight you could get from talking to people like that. So the bottom line is that it's really not one single thing. I know that in this world, you're encouraged to, when I was growing up, you be a lawyer, you be a doctor, you be an engineer, you be a teacher, you have this professional focus. But I think the contemporary world has nullified that perception. It's really not true for today. You could do anything you enjoy and make money from it. And you could certainly do as many things as you have the capacity, the skill, and the resources for, and you'll still be fine. And you mentioned politics. You're welcome. That's where you need to be, because we need to change the world. Very important,
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I guess just like from a designing, I like to design myself as well. And, that's something that will be able to complement any profession that you're going into. You know what I mean? Because it's almost like a hobby. It's like a artistic hobby. So I feel like your interest in fashion and design would never be a hindrance of like your professional career as well. Until you become such a huge designer where it interferes. But in the meantime, you can always definitely chip away at like different designs, and of course set up your LLC and do like an e-commerce business and stuff like that, for sure. So yeah, definitely keep designing.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I really like what both of you guys just said. I think that's really useful information. One, just really easy and quick visual aid that I've used, it's like the easiest thing. I don't know why there isn't a fancier version of it, but I would take big poster board, like the kind you would make a presentation on, and I would put in the middle like we can call it a career goal, but I just remember I put in the middle, I was probably 21, and I put make Cuba happen. I put it in the middle, and then it was like an octopus. I branched off, and I would put journalism in another bubble. So the main bubble is Cuba, a sub bubble is journalism. I would list different media outlets. I would put their editors' contact phone numbers, etc., and then just go down the list that way. In another bubble, I would have tourism. Now, all of this is relating to my main goal of move to Cuba and make money in Cuba, but we have journalism stuff here with journalism contacts here. I had tourism realm here. And I would just say, like what Gandhi was saying, just make friends, make contacts. It's a great skill or talent, and it's definitely character building. If you can say, oh, I know someone in that place who works in that industry. Oh, I know someone in this place that can help you with this thing or help me with this thing. And I will, just like he said, you can never have too many friends. Obviously, you don't want fake friends, but you want people who know about different worlds than just your own, personal world. You want to be able to network. So yeah, if you're interested in politics, like get an internship in politics, see what interests you about politics and try to like milk out those ideas.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Honestly, I used to be a political science major, and I realized I didn't want to work in government systems. I thought they were severely corrupt, and I could never see myself also doing that. And so, I find myself like watching documentaries about politics, researching things about politics, government systems, like authoritarianism, all that stuff. And I was like, well, I could always go the academia route. Like I've always, been that like straight A student. Like I love learning all that stuff. So I feel like a lot of what you said is like what I'm experiencing now, just kind of like finding your skill and finding out what works for you. But I really appreciate all your advice. Thank you.
Can definitely relate to I was undecided until late into my junior year. So if you're I'm not sure what year you're in, Nancy. I know Haley, you're a sophomore.
I'm also a sophomore.
Okay, yeah. So, if you're still undecided, don't feel bad at all. Like I wasn't, not to say that like to follow my example, but I wasn't, I was kind of like you. I was just interested in so many different topics. That's why I ended up choosing anthropology, because it's the study of humanity. You can have anthropology of this, anthropology of that. That's why I went with that one. But yeah, don't be in a rush to decide. You can fit it'll click eventually.
Very good. Very, very interesting. So true. I love, what I'm taking away is like networking. Like, you guys have mentioned that several times. It's so true. Those networks we build are so important. And learning, from people. So podcasts, that's just such a great point too, Hannah. There's so much information out there to learn. And sometimes, gosh, going through the internet, it's just like, oh, where do you even start? So starting with a podcast, that's a good point. Well, I know it's 4:00. So I think, do we say we're ending this at 4 or 4:30? Do we say 4? Someone can remind me, because I've done a few of these. So yeah, so we want to go ahead and end, unless there's anything, if you guys have some last words, you want to just, any last word of advice, thought?
Thank you guys so much. That was an amazing 1 hour. Truly appreciate it. Thank you.
I also want to say thank you. I appreciate the advice. So necessary.
Something that I would like to add is just the fact that you've probably heard this before, but just the fact that you're, attending a virtual panel and asking questions, I think that already shows really the type of people that you are. And what it means is you're very curious. And I think if you can run with whatever curiosity you have, first of all, it's great that you have multiple interests. Like, how boring would life be if you didn't have any interests? So how great that, different things can bring a smile to your face, or like really encourage you to take action regardless of what it is. So I think that if you can, you will be able to harness that. It might feel like bigger than yourself right now, but run with all of those things and reach out for people. There's so much information out there, and so many people who are interested in also giving you their 2 cents. So if there are things that you don't understand about how an industry works, ask the experts in that industry. And I think people in general, you might have a few mean people, but I think in general, people are more than willing to open up and tell you about their experiences. Like, other people are a wealth of knowledge. So you're all going to do great in life because you're attending this and you're asking great questions. So.
And they're getting expert knowledge.
And I mean, the one thing I'll also add is, like, how cool is it that none of us, none of the panelists had this linear, I want to be a business person studying business, want to be my own boss. Like, we all kind of pivoted in different directions because of what life threw at us, or because of the financial situation we were in, or because of COVID. And we all pursued many different facets of who we are as people, not just what we want to be when we grow up. So if you have that energy, which it sounds like you all do, then poke around. You're all young. I mean, we're all young still too. And, run with whatever interests you.
All right, guys, let me just add this, and let me just add this as my final word. Three things, really. The first one is you need to understand the true meaning of the word no, like N-O, because you're going to hear that a lot. So usually when you hear it, it really is devoid of meaning. What it means is left to your interpretation. So if you ask for something and someone says no, you could decide to interpret that to mean that you have failed, or you're crushed, or a door has been shut, or an opportunity has been closed. Or you could say, well, that person wasn't good enough. You probably need something better. So the word no is so fluid, something I learned very early to help you understand what people call disappointment. I really hardly feel that. Sometimes if I'm, poaching something and it's not coming through, well, maybe I probably should be doing something better. Maybe it's really not good enough. Because I think if I'm presenting an opportunity that I'm convinced about to people, say I'm trying to sell an idea or a product, and you don't see why you should buy it, I don't consider it my loss. If I'm convinced as to the value of what I'm selling, again, whether it's an idea or a product, I think it's your loss. So if you say no, that's fine. So I think that's what I'll implore you guys to try and understand. Interpret the word no, because you're going to hear it a lot. Ask people for things, ask for opportunities, apply for jobs, positions, whatever, and somebody says no, that's fine. It really means nothing. Just move on to the next thing. Now, the second point is that it's really a big picture, like the word, and this sounding too philosophical, but it's a big picture made up of very small points. Yeah, and I'm describing life now, and that covers everything you're ever going to do. All right, so you do something today, it turns out well. You could do something tomorrow, it won't turn out well. But it's not the 2 points of activities that really matter. It is when you join all those points together, say in another 5 years, in another 10 years, that's when it'll start to make sense. All right, so if you got kicked out of college, not a good thing really for the moment, but if that gave you the time to like Hannah, start a real estate business, and now 5 years from now you become a millionaire, well, maybe it starts to look like a pretty good thing that you were kicked out of college. So you start to see that the points by themselves don't really matter much. It's the larger picture. So you've got to learn to interpret that. So if one bad thing happens, so that's fine. It's probably supposed to happen. Maybe a good thing comes tomorrow. So when you start to mix all of those points together, you get the larger picture and you'll be a happier person. The last thing is this. I'll recommend 2 books to you. The first one is called How to Think Clearly. It was written by a guy called Rolf Dobelli. Rolf is R-O-L-F. Dobelli is D-O-B-E-L-L-I. Pretty nice guy, pretty brilliant guy. Read the book. It basically breaks down how you could interpret, some of the processes you'll go through in life, how you could help your brain to think and process information. And the other book is actually a recent book by Ray Dalio, the American billionaire. I don't have opinions about billionaires one way or the other, but I like to pick ideas off of people regardless of what it is they do politically. And his book is Principles on How to Deal with the Changing World Order. It's a recent book by him. Look at these 2 books. I think they'll give you a great insight into how to deal with this, 7.5 billion human beings around the world.
What was the second one? What was the second one, Gandhi?
It's Principles on How to Deal with the New World Order.
Oh, interesting. Cool. Is it The Art of Thinking Clearly? Is that the one that you're talking about?
Yeah, by Rolf Dobelli, yes.
Rolf Dobelli. Okay, cool. The Art of Thinking Clearly.
Yeah.
And say the other one more time, because I just...
Principles on How to Deal with the New World Order.
Cool.
That's by Ray Dalio.
Cool. Great. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Really, really, really appreciate our panelists. Thank you so much for taking this hour. really such a blessing to our students, to us. We really can't thank you enough. So thank you. Really appreciate this. So take care. Have a great evening.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
It was nice talking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So follow ARAG Apparel.
Hey, you better put your website in the chat. You guys should both put your websites in the chat, because it sounds like, Gandhi, you have opportunities too to collaborate,
Yeah, I'll put my website in the chat so you guys check.
Yeah, that'll be great. Then we'll have it there, because remember, this is being recorded, so you never know. I mean, it's not like we're gonna send it out to a bunch of people, but we'll have it for when when a student is interested and wants to watch it.
You could send it out. We're open for business. So we actually have a hospitality portfolio, very nice hotel and resort center we just opened in West Africa. Some of you, whenever you're visiting, you could check it out. I'll put the link here. So Hannah, if you ever travel to West Africa, Youssef, Nancy, Haley, any one of you,
I was there recently for during the year of the return. They had the Afro Fest. That was in Ghana though. So next on the bucket list, Nigeria.
Yeah, you do that trip, and we're gonna take you to the resort. You'll enjoy it.
Nice. I heard lots of good things. I heard you said it's dangerous, but I heard it's more fun than it is dangerous.
Yeah, that's for the protected area. It's very, very dangerous right now. Actually, yesterday there was 2 days ago, the terrorists attacked Nigeria's main train line, abducted hundreds of people and killed scores of others. It's a terrible situation right now. But again, we'll find a way to leave. It's not a problem.
So Hannah, you do custom trips to Cuba?
Yeah. So I guess between the three of us, we'll just go all over the place. Yeah.
I'll let you know when I come out with the Cuban ARAG. It's on the list.
That sounds great. That sounds great.
And if any of you guys, wanted to set up a company and you need advice on the corporate structure, the legal,
Absolutely.
Outline and all of that, just reach out to me. I'll help you with that.
Yeah, I will be reaching out to you. We'll talk.
No problem.
Okay. Well, it was a pleasure. Thanks for inviting us.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
For hosting us.
All right. Take care.
Bye.